All right, so we're online, folks.
Are we online on the camera?
Yeah, we're online.
Both of them?
Both going.
Okay, very good. Thank you everyone for joining us today for the Brooklyn Tea Party meeting for October. Thank you. The weather held up, thank God. And we are here to introduce to you our guest speaker, the conservative candidate for Comptroller of the City of New York, Paul Rodriguez. Thank you. Okay, everybody hear me all right? Yeah. Well, thank you so much for the kind invitation, Glenn. Thank you for indulging me and spending some time with me to hear a bit about my views and a little bit about my background. I know probably most of you have no clue who I am. Now, you may know the name Paul Rodriguez as we kept talking about comedians. So, if you feel like you always have to be humorous, believe me, with a name like Paul Rodriguez, back when I was past president of the New York Young Republican Club, I almost felt I had to be entertaining when I was in, bringing the speakers and talking about what was going on. So I'll try not to bore you with just numbers and things, but really engage you as best as I can. First of all, let me tell you a little bit about myself on the political side so you know where I'm coming from, and then on the personal side. As I did mention, I was involved in politics for many years. I'm actually a registered Republican, have been pretty much my whole adult life. I'm currently the Conservative Party candidate for Comptroller. Now, how I got to that point, as you know, typically oftentimes we have one person who carries the banner of both the Republican and Conservative line here in New York City when they run for office. But let me give you a little bit of background of how that happened. I was involved in politics for many years. I actually ran for Congress back in 2004. Yes, I'm that old. And I was the Republican Party, Conservative Party, and School Choice Party nominee for the 12th Congressional District here in Brooklyn. Back then, they called it sort of the Elephant District. It was a largely Hispanic, also Asian district. Currently, the person in there is Nidia Velasquez. You may or may not be aware of that. I am Latino, so I speak Spanish. So we really went out on a very grassroots campaign, door-to-door, speaking to not just English, Spanish, the Chinese community, Asian community, Orthodox community, in Borough Park as well as Williamsburg. So it was a very grassroots campaign. I also was actually part of a documentary back then. If you may recall, 2004 coincided with the Republican National Convention. And back then I was president of the New York Young Republican Club. So some filmmakers came in and asked me, we're putting this documentary about the RNC, would you be part of it? And of course, for us on the right between New York City, we always see that with some kind of a caution, because typically they don't want to, they don't approach us to make us look well, or to really show or tell our story honestly. But they actually did a good job. So I was on the one side, on the other side was this woman who was a homeless activist, who said was homeless, but then showed up to the movie, the documentary premiere on the Lower East Side with a leather jacket and a cell phone and a lot of these things, which according to her were all donated by supporters of her organization. And then Michelle Goldberg, who some of you may know from the press, she was at Salon at the time, and now I believe she writes for the New York Times or who knows, or MSNBC or what have you. So that's sort of my political background. Very recently, I was approached to say, Paul, would you be interested in running for Comptroller? Why? I have more than 25 years of experience in finance and banking in all aspects of it. I started out my career as an equity research analyst, which for the lay people, I would say that's a stock analyst. Now, if Brad Lander, the current Democratic nominee for Comptroller, heard that, he'd probably think I was some sort of super woke HR diversity consultant, because I'm an equity analyst. But no, I was a stock analyst. Transitioned to becoming a credit analyst, worked in corporate finance, was a corporate banker, also did a few stints in wealth management. So I basically worked with every type of entity, every type of client on financial matters, from a very humble individual working perhaps as a steward on the Pierre Hotel, all the way up to the largest corporation, largest multinational globally, because I've always worked internationally. So I bring that breadth of experience and diversity of experience to the race and to the job of Comptroller. On top of that, I've also had a lot of experience working, for good or not, and now it seems it was for good, working with distressed industries and companies. Basically, for whatever reason, I always ended up being assigned to sectors or regions that were going through crises, that were facing a lot of problems. So, for example, when I switched over from covering companies in the US and Europe to the emerging markets in Latin America, 4 months after that, the Mexican peso devalued. And then through a whole series of other devaluations, bond defaults, and all sorts of craziness, I've had to deal with all of that volatility and learn how to behave in that environment, how to work things out. So, I was approached about running for controller. Now, ideally, as you all know, the ideal would be for us to all rally around a single individual. Really harness the power that we have of all of us sort of on the same sort of ideological right, where we both think about limited government, respect for life, respect for our values, economic empowerment, accountability, self-sufficiency, all those things, and of course fiscal sanity and responsibility. That would be the ideal, but yet, and in fact, I was actually even ready to step away from the race. But what happened? As you know, there's been a lot of infighting within the Republican Party this year, unfortunately. And the way things split up had nothing to do even with the controller's race. You had those who were supporting Curtis Sliwa for mayor, those who were supporting Fernando Mateo. And then, of course, Bill Pepitone was his own on the Conservative Party. Well, the people who were supporting Curtis Sliwa were forced to say, okay, if you're supporting me, you have to support John Tobacco, who had been a candidate. I think he's still on a third party, maybe libertarian. And the people who were supporting Fernando Mateo had to go with this young man, David Carreras. And that's how it basically shook out. But what happened? Curtis ended up winning the primary, but then John Tobacco was bumped from the ballot, and you ended up having David Carreras. Well, David Carreras has made it very clear there is no way he could work with Curtis Lee. It just cannot happen. And in fact, called him out and say, there's no way I could work with you, supposedly because he was never Trumper or for whatever reason. But the problem is there is really not that unity. And in fact, the Conservative Party had originally endorsed one of the other candidates, but then found out some things about that candidate's background, which it's not necessary for me to go into, that they said, okay, we can't endorse him. That's going to tarnish our reputation. It's going to tarnish the good work we're trying to do here in the city. So they approached me and they said, Paul, even if you did not have backing, formal backing from the Republican Party, would you still run? And I had to think about it because, again, I share all your concerns about splitting tickets and things of that nature. And after much deliberation, I said, okay, fine. I said that I would, so I will carry your banner in the Conservative Party. First and foremost, because it's disconcerting to me that in one of the global capitals of the world, as New York City is, the best that we could come up with, frankly, was on the Democratic side, just your typical career politician who's term limited out of the council or what have you. So, okay, I don't want to get another job. I don't want to get a real job. I want to try different things. Let me see what else I can run for. Oh, controller. I have absolutely no background in finance, no background in budgeting, none of that, not really any of experience in that case. But I'm a progressive, I'm a Democrat, and in the city, if you're a Democrat, you're gold, right? And I could use this to run for mayor. It used to be people ran for public advocate to become mayor, now they run for controller, even though they don't have any experience, just like our current controller had no experience in financial matters. But then on our side, where you would think we have a lot of talent, we should be able to find someone who's really good. All that we could come up with were basically two penny stockbrokers. One who's banned from the industry, and the other one who likes to pad his resume and call himself a money manager or an investment banker when he's been neither. And so therefore, I found myself, it may seem a bit cliche, but when they say, why did you run? I felt I had to. I felt, am I really going to turn my back if people are reaching out to me and not try to really come here intelligently and talk about the problems that we're facing? So I had a debate with Mr. Carreras, the Republican nominee, on Manhattan Neighborhood Network, and we did post it on the Facebook page. And of course, Brett Lander, the Democrat, declined to participate. So It was an interesting debate. I think we talked about some things of substance, but there were a couple of things that he mentioned in his sort of rambling on during the debate, which I think should be highlighted. And this is probably a perfect example of why it is, in many ways, that you're also seeing me here. When he was asked, when we were both asked, how come you are both not carrying the banner for both Republican and conservative? Why is it split? Why is this happening? And they asked Mr. Carreras, why are you not the Conservative Party nominee as well? And this is what he answered. Well, I am a moderate. I love Democrats. Most of my friends, I have very good friends who are Democrats. I'm just against progressives. Now we do know we live in New York City. That wins the award for the distinction without a difference. That's you trying to say, oh, okay, I'm on this side, but I'm not really side. I'm not against. I love Democrats. You know, I love them. They're my great friends. We go have drinks all the time. Oh, I'm just against progressives. And you know what? The Republican part of me is only because my values are Republican. I respect life. I believe in empowerment. Blah blah blah. But moderate, I'm conservative. And mind you, when President Trump was in office, he was one of the most ardent, supposedly, supporters of President Trump. But why do I bring this up? It's not really to throw sand on my opponent, but I think it's to highlight one thing which I'm sure, particularly if you're members of the Tea Party, have seen for many years and has been very disconcerting. Unfortunately, what has been one of the biggest obstacles, first for the conservative movement, or with the contract with America, or with the Tea Party, and even with Trump populism, has unfortunately been our very own partisans, our very own ideological compatriots, either party hacks or grifters on the right, who basically don't really want to see change. They don't really want to address the issues. All they want is to get paid. Think about Fernando Mateo running for mayor. Right before the mayoral election, I think he received about $2 million in matching funds. And he lost the election, I think, like 75 to 25. What does that happen with those $2 million? That's taxpayer money. I mean, think about it. In a city where it's so strongly to one party versus the other, all that really, this 8-to-1 campaign finance matching, really all it really ends up being is that the incumbents get to have a payday. The incumbents and other consultants get to have a payday. So this is a problem that we need to address, and by simply saying, oh, you're going to split the ticket, which I completely agree with you. But if we keep voting for the same people over and over again under the same guise, and the same holds true for the left, because some people say, oh, don't vote for Bernie or don't vote for whoever you seem to agree with because it's going to hurt your side. But the difference oftentimes I see with the left and right, the right, sometimes we tend to be very short-term oriented. The left plays the long game. We think it's impossible for the right to get a foothold here in New York, even though we elected Giuliani, and then by default elected Bloomberg, although Bloomberg was always iffy, but it was mostly the coattails of Giuliani how we ended up with Bloomberg. But in a place, for example, like Texas, where you say, look, liberals, Democrats can't win. Well, we forget, Texas used to be Democrat. Then it became Republican. Now they're saying it's trending the other way. Many places that were very hard red or very conservative, if you will, do trend to the other way because they're looking at the long game. They just keep trying. They don't relent. So we cannot relent. But we have to have the right messenger, and we have to put forth the message. Otherwise, what are we doing? We're just biding time. So let me get a little bit, a couple more things from our debate, just because, let me be Paul Rodriguez, and maybe this will amuse you. So under the equity versus equality banner, the award, what was, Mr. Carreras was asked about the pension plans and how you can fund them and what you can do. He says, it's impossible to level the playing field. You have to clear it. All you can do is clear it. Now, it may seem like a very nice platitude innocuous, but think about what that means. It's impossible to level the playing field. That means that equality of opportunity, in his mind, is irrelevant. It means nothing. all you can do is clear it. So all you can do is have the government come in and make everybody the same. It's this tired argument of equity over equality. Now, I don't know about you, but I believe that we all have equality of opportunity, which is the important thing. What you do with it afterwards, it's up to you. I was raised by a single mother. I'll tell you very honestly, I was born out of wedlock in Queens. Single mom. She was 21 years old. She could have thought about terrible things, about saying, oh, this is too hard, I can't do it. But no, she had me. She raised me. It was very difficult. When I was a child, she decided to move back to Puerto Rico. And then when I was 11 years old, we moved to Atlanta, Georgia. So here I am, a New Yorker in heart and spirit all my life. But at the same time, I have this diverse upbringing where I got to see how things were, not just in Puerto Rico, so that I could learn more about my roots. I could learn Spanish. I've actually lost my accent, which I had for many years. And then I also got to live in the Deep South, which the important thing about that is that having a perspective outside from just New York City, outside from the Manhattanites, because I know you see some of those aspects here in Brooklyn and Queens, but you don't always see them in Manhattan. And it's ironic that Brad Lander, the Democratic nominee, he's from Missouri. So you would think, well, you know, it's a carpetbagger, no offense, but maybe he brings some of that Midwestern, common sense. But no, he's the leader of the Progressive Caucus of the city council. He says, I'm going to be more left than New Yorkers. I'm going to be the most progressive of all the progressives. And unfortunately, that kind of works. So he's right now in a listening tour, which we all learned that from Hillary. From Hillary, of course. It's a listening tour. He's on a listening tour. Well, it's great to be on a listening tour because you don't necessarily have to say anything. And I don't know about you, I'm Puerto Rican. It's very hard for me not to say anything to yourself. But you have to do more. You definitely have to listen, but you also have to have some policies that are relevant. And let's be honest, his policies are basically whatever policies that is as city councilman. He just changed the website around a little bit. My website is very Spartan, it's very bare bones, but it's very relevant to the job of controller. So I welcome you to check it at Rodriguez4ny.org. When you go on it, you might say, there's nothing on here. No, click on the tabs, you'll see it. But that's why I'm here. That's why I'm here in front of you. Now, the city is currently facing a very deep financial crisis. And we haven't seen it, the likes of which you really haven't seen since the 1970s. And some of you who are of maybe my generation or older will know that that's when Gerald Ford told New York City to drop debt when they were looking for a bailout. Hey, drop debt. 1974. I was 5 years old back then. Yes, I am older than I look. So, but yeah, what do our elected officials do? They failed us. They basically are more content with virtue signaling and just sitting around, kicking the can down the road, hopefully for some bailout that probably may not come. I think actually we did get, I think maybe $50 billion or somewhere around there that we were supposedly going to get from the federal government. Which again, okay, that maybe helps you deal with the issue 1 year. What happens with the rest of it? Now, one good proxy for just how bad things are, it's the pension plans of the city. So we have pension plans, it's about a $250 to $300 billion among the 5 pension plans. Now, according to the published figures, which are going to be updated fairly soon, but those pension plans are underfunded by somewhere between $40 and $50 billion. As bad as that sounds, it's still not even the truth. If you're really going to be honest with people and really identify what's the liability that we're facing, the number is really closer to $120 to $130 billion underfunded. Now let me put that into context. For that amount of money, you could build the Freedom Tower over about 35 times over. For that money. That money is more than the already overinflated budget of New York City, which is at almost $100 billion. And mind you, this is a budget that in the last 20 years has gone from 50 to 100, and even accounting for inflation, it's 50% above what it used to be in real terms. Despite the fact that over the last 20 years, the population of New York City has grown by only about 2 to 3%. So we have a 50% real increase in the budget, about 100% nominally, with only about 200% about 200,000 or so increase in population in the last 20 years. Where's all this money going from? And we still can't seem to pay our bills. We still complain that, oh, we can't clean the subway.